What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV back here for another Tottenham update, and we got double trouble here today. We got Sai and Sean with us. Sean, how you doing, my friend?
I'm good, Ben. Yeah, good to be back. Thank you for having me. Good to see you as well, Sai. I love your. You just changed the name in your little thing at the bottom there. Very cool, mate. Very cool.
Oh, thank you very much. Good to see you guys.
And the talented Sai with us with his lovely paintings in the background. How you doing, Sai?
Yeah, right. They're actually for sale if anyone wants to buy one. £10 or so goes towards the Tottenham charity of Enoch because they're going to run out of money.
It goes towards our centre-back fund, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, talking about centre-backs, let's get in to the news today, talking about Tosin Adarabioyo. As Santi Auna says that an agreement has been almost found between Monaco and Fulham central defender Tosin Adarabioyo, and the player has an offer from Tottenham but favours the move to Monaco. I have seen from another source saying that a bid from Monaco has gone in, but only for about €5 million. I'm not sure if they're going to get an agreement for that, but apparently he does favour the move to Monaco over Spurs. And either of you can chime in first, but why do you think he would favour a move to Monaco over Spurs? Is it purely based on minutes, you guys reckon?
I think there's lifestyle. Monaco's tax-free as well, as far as I'm aware. It's a beautiful part of the world. I don't know what Monaco are doing as a football club right now. I can't remember if they're in Europe or not, but they, I think there's a combination of factors that probably, pile up. I'd be interested to know what the bid was that Tottenham put in, if the offer is there, or if it hasn't been accepted, then is it just personal terms? I'd be surprised because I think that Tosin Adarabioyo at the moment is the best of the rest. Of all of the names we've been linked with, Van de Ven, Tapsoba, those are the two that we were hoping for. Most fans were looking for both of them. But if we were going to get one and we were going to go to one of the other 3 or 4 names that we've been linked with, which you could make out, I guess, a Tosin, Victor Nelson, I don't know, players like Harry Maguire or Clement Longley, that sort of ilk, then I think that Tosin was probably the best of the rest. And given the propensity with Romero to have injuries and time off during the season, I don't necessarily think that Tosin wouldn't be playing a lot of minutes if he did sign for Tottenham. So it's a bit of a surprising one for me, if it's true. And it's another nail in the coffin of an already disappointing transfer window, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, this centre-back situation is just rumbling on. It seems to be getting progressively worse day by day with the news coming out, with the Tapsoba news yesterday, with Bayern, Bayer Leverkusen really just don't need to sell anymore. Now the Tosin news. I mean, they're getting battered away one by one at the moment. How are you feeling about the whole situation, Si?
Yeah, I think, like Sean just said, it's not the only time it's happened, though. It's like every summer is exactly the same. There was a funny little kind of diagram chart that's been going around a lot of groups today about who's been signing what centre-backs since the sort of 16-17 season. And we've got like an abysmal 3 on there. And to be fair, though, Jan and Toby were kind of phasing through that period still. So there wasn't maybe a massive necessity. But then obviously that just dropped off the cliff, really. And the kind of 3 defenders, Romero probably out of those 3 is pretty awesome, albeit not a great season last year. But it's like every other club apart from Tottenham has a strategy in place when it comes to transfers, not just centre backs but across the board. And it's that same old story of the first week, some excitement, and we think it's going to go all well again. And then before you know it, the season's about to start in what, two weeks or so, and still no sign of that. So I'm not surprised at all. We've all been Spurs fans long enough. I'll just try and keep a bit more calm about it these days, because otherwise you just rile yourself up. But yeah, it's just largely disappointing, because that's we've talked about it before, and you guys have as well. It's the biggest priority area of the team, to be honest. So I don't understand why we don't have it in place before the window even opens. It's like, what do these guys actually do for 7-8 months since January? Are they twiddling their thumbs? Like, what happens? And then it's the last week of the window. They're trying to scrape the barrel again. But as I say, I'm not surprised. It's just a constant wind up about it, isn't it?
It never ceases to amaze me, because we've been talking about this position now for so long. It's like literally a broken record, time and time again, just listening to the same jargon. And like this position, literally for this season, is make or break for our season, in my opinion. And if we get it right, I think we can go on and have a really good season. I think I'm liking the look of the options everywhere else on the pitch, apart from in that centre-back position. And it's like, does he never learn his lesson, Daniel Levy? Because you're looking at the Tapsoba deal. For me, he was my number one choice to come in as a partner for Christian Romero. And it's just like, it still could have got done for probably a lesser fee if we got it done before the Moussa Diaby deal to Aston Villa. And it's just like, this is the value in getting your deals done early. And if you let it rumble on till the latter stage of the window, literally anything can happen. So it just doesn't make sense to me why you don't just go and get the deals done.
I think for me, it's, increasingly obvious, increasingly clear to me that there's something amiss with the way that his mind, the thought process around his mind goes when it comes to these sorts of decisions. He either has a compromise in his head where he undervalues the assets of other teams, and then you compare that to how he overvalues the assets that he has within his team to the point where we always end up with a stalemate. You look at teams like Chelsea right now that have had about 700 players through a revolving door policy in or out over the last 12, 18 months. And we're, 3-4 weeks into the transfer window of the most important transformation at this club in years and years and years. And we've only managed to bring in 3 players that weren't already at the club and get 1 player out. Yet we know how many of the deadwood we need to get out. And there's either that stubbornness on his part where he's working in an insular period where he doesn't factor in the variables of what other clubs want to do and consider that it's not just his idea that's going on. There's moving parts. Other clubs are also trying to make things happen. Or alternatively, and it could be it's not necessarily an either or, it's probably a combination of both. I think there's distractions happening right now. I think he is distracted with 4 or 5 different things that are happening within the club with regards his efforts in, what he wants to do with the stadium, the NFL team, if that's a thing. Obviously, what's happened with Joe Lewis over the last 48 hours, maybe that's come around. I think these tours, he goes away on these tours and wants to focus on the commercialization and go and meet certain parties and various different owners or directors of companies in those areas to try and find ways to get more blood from the stone. But at the same time, when you don't have a director of football, when you don't have Scott Munn in place for that delay, all of these things then leave you with a situation where there's not enough cogs, there's not enough irons in the fire, there's not enough things going on. And if it's just down to him, he can't do everything himself. And when you're working with a beast this size and there's so much that needs to be done, it leaves you with a feeling that's quite palpable in my mind right now that he has taken the club to a point where it's too big for him and him alone. And he doesn't like to let go of the strings or the reins, so to speak. And I think that all of those things compound on itself to leave us in the situation that we're in right now.
All right, well, let's move on. Let's talk about the Harry Kane situation, because Matt Law's done an article this evening and he says Bayern Munich are ready to renew their assault to try and sign Harry Kane, with Bayern executives having not travelled to the preseason tour to Asia, so they can negotiate a deal for Harry Kane with Daniel Levy. Tottenham have returned to London from their preseason tour and they will be met by Bayern chief executive Jan Driesden and Marco Neppe. There have been suggestions that Bayern would agree a buyback option for Spurs in order to sign Harry Kane this summer, which could help satisfy all parties. Sources claim that Levy had been close to agreeing a deal to sell Kane to Paris Saint-Germain, but the striker does not want to move to France this summer. PSG remain willing to outbid any other club for Harry Kane, but it would take a major U-turn from the England captain to consider an offer. And Ben Jacobs says that Bayern's third bid for Harry Kane is expected to be close to 100 million euros. New round of talks with Daniel Levy incoming, and Bayern are optimistic that they will find a deal to be done with Daniel Levy at some point. So, Sai, do you think that this deal will end up happening? And would you be very happy if a buyback clause was added into that deal?
Yes, to that latter part. I personally don't think Harry's going anywhere anyway. I think there's a lot of PR stuff always goes around, especially when it's potential conversations about new contracts, etc., or at least a bit of pressure from some source. It doesn't really make sense for me, other than obviously Champions League football and the chance to win something, to go to like Germany or even France. PSG is obviously a great club, but it's pretty much one of the only few in France. Like, they just obviously accelerate beyond the others because of all the money and everything. So that's one of the easy options for all. But I think for Harry, like the type of person and the player is, I think he wants that top goal scorer of all time in the Premier League. He's not going to do that, but yes, of course, he can come back and do it. And I still think in 3-4 years' time, he could still score 20+ goals easily. He's that kind of professional. But I feel like he would want to do that first before going. It wouldn't. I'm speaking as if I know him, but I would make a big.
We all know him, Ty. We all know him.
Of course, we all know him. I know he's a Tottenham lad, so I think it's like that. That's what kind of confuses me when I see all these kind of weird reports. As I said, it could just be bargaining chips. It could be PR. Who knows? But the fact of the matter is, there is a big conversation there anyway. As everyone knows, his contract's up next season, so there's going to be a financial conversation at some point. Whether it's like when Sean says the other day, and loads of other people, like, there's a decision to make. And I hate this because, like, it's every season. It's like, where's Harry going? He's going to United. He's going here. He's going here. It's like boring. It's so boring. He must be bored of it. And he doesn't really need to have to keep coming out every 5 seconds to say, I'm not going anywhere, this, that, and the other. Just like let him be. But
why doesn't he just sign the contract then?
Well, that's it. But then that's the pressure, isn't it? Because then who's putting the PR out? Is it Harry's camp for a potential like new contract or the move? Or is it the other way around, where it's Tottenham putting the PR to put pressure on them to make a decision? Who knows? Like, it'd be lovely to see the full insight of like what actually goes on the PR cycle of all this. But yeah, for me, I can't see him going there. If it was to be anywhere, it'd be probably a Premier League team. But then equally, why on earth wouldn't he just wait a season, do his best for Spurs again, and then go on a free and get loads more money in salary and wages, which doesn't make any sense. So that's just my thought anyway. I just can't see him going. I think
that's potentially, ideally, in an ideal world, probably what he would want to do. But I think maybe at this stage, do you reckon maybe people in Spurs and the hierarchy are putting a bit of pressure on him to get the money in if he is going to leave on a free? But Fabrizio Romano has just tweeted as well right now saying the Bayern board is set to meet Tottenham chairman Daniel Levy to discuss Harry Kane deal. Meeting scheduled on Friday as expected. Bayern are prepared to improve on their 80 million plus add-ons offer that was rejected 15 days ago. PSG keen in any case Bayern deal collapses. How do you feel on this situation, Sean?
My stance on it has changed over the last 2 or 3 months. At the moment, I'm at the point where I want this to be over. I want it to be concluded very soon. I mean, that's always been the case. And I always knew it was going to be a dragging on affair that was going to disrupt our entire summer. But when I thought that was happening, I didn't realize we'd also have a new manager and a new chief footballing officer and all these other sort of variables that are in the mix. And I think this dragging on any longer is a major issue. For me personally, I've said it 100 times, that you're always going to feel the impact of losing Harry Kane. But I do believe that under an Ange Postecoglou system, I don't think you're going to feel the impact of losing Harry Kane if you wanted to play him in the 9 as much as you would under any other manager or any other system. I think the 9, specifically in his system, is more of a sacrificial lamb, and therefore, unless you wanted to reposition Harry Kane, you wouldn't be getting the best out of him if you were to play him in that role anyway. What I've seen in the preseason, I feel like he either hasn't been interested, been a bit distracted, or hasn't figured out what's been asked of him. In any event, I'm confident that our team is strong enough. Even though I'm not a fan of Richie, as you guys know, I still think he is going to be far better, far more appropriate for this system. I think his work rate, if he can get his finishing boots on. Anyway, my point is that I think the system, I think the front end of the pitch will be okay. And I think we need that £100 million, £190 million. And if the number, I'm not sure if they're going to improve or whether that number is going to look with a euro sign or a pound sign. But if there is a number that looks like 90 something or 100 something with a pound sign in front of it, I think Daniel Levy absolutely has to take it, if I'm entirely honest. I think we need to move on. Whether or not Harry Kane wants to stay, it's clear to me that he's okay and up for leaving. The fact that he hasn't been involved in any of the journalistic interviews, even ones where we could control it on Spurs play, he hasn't been involved. That to me tells me that he's not going to be comfortable answering questions because he must have a divided mind at best or a settled mind that we don't want to hear at worst. So I want this to be done, and then I want there to be no excuses. I want us to take that money. I personally, Ben, don't necessarily agree that the only area we need to improve is the centre back. I do think that's obviously the key area we need to go in. I also personally think that we need another 6 or a better 6 or some sort of clarification in that kind of defensive role. And I would also make the argument from what I've seen so far in pre-season, the right back area. I know we're overloaded with players, but I don't think any of them really have impressed me. Pedro Porro, Emerson Royale, Jed Spence hasn't got the minutes yet, but I'm not really comfortable with that right side. So if we can get 100 million quid, I think then we can add that to whatever else is coming in for the Hojbjerg money. I know we're going to move on to that in a second. And then also whatever money was put aside for defenders, and then go and use that as a giant budget to pay these inflated fees. There are inflated fees in the market right now, but you have to get on board it. Other teams are willing to do it. We have to as well. And so in a nutshell, get this over and done with very soon. Hopefully everyone can move ahead. We can get the money and then we can go to work and fill those gaps that we desperately need. Otherwise, this season is going to be a very, very large struggle unless we can fill those holes at the back of the club, back of the team.
You talk about it having to have a pound sign, 90 million pounds, 100 million pounds. If the maximum bid from Bayern is 100 million euros and they will not go any further than that, and he refuses to go to PSG, do you take it?
So what would that be? About 85 million, 84 million euros, something like that.
No, about 85 million pounds, so 100 million euros.
Sorry, 100 million. Sorry, 85 million pounds. I still think I've always said that is the kind of Goldilocks zone. Anything around that number is where you've got to get on the dance floor and at least consider it. Look, Bayern Munich have got a couple of players that I'd be very much interested in. I know there were some spurious links today with players like Benjamin Pavard. I know a lot of people think he's yesterday's news. I personally think the Benjamin Pavard, I don't know if he would even want to come to Tottenham, but if there is any interest there, I think he could slot in and be an absolute perfect fit to do the right back / right side centre back role with the way that we play this kind of 3-2-5 system. I think he would absolutely be a world class signing in that regard. And then obviously that takes the pressure off necessarily having to go and get 2 more centre backs because he can play as a centre back as well. I think there's obviously Gravenberch. There's other players that Bayern Munich might want to put in. I know that player plus cash swap deals are very difficult to do because you've got 3 kind of intermediaries, 3 sets of agents, 3 players. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can do a deal like what Leicester did with Tottenham with Harry Winks and James Maddison, kind of make the 2 conversations separate, but at least they can happen at the same time concurrently. But yeah, if it doesn't have to be, because I worry whether or not Bayern Munich are going to have the cash to pay what Daniel Levy wants, and so maybe the difference could be made up with a player. But if that's not possible, and they were dead set and said we've only got 85 million pound, I still think that Daniel Levy should take it, if I'm honest.
Because I think that it will be the next bid from Bayern Munich. I'm sure we'll hear more about it tomorrow. But Si, would you take that money?
No, because I want Harry to stay.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, if he's not going to sign the contract, and you're very likely going to lose him on a free transfer at the end of next season. I mean, would you not just rather take the money and try and move on?
From a financial sense, from a financial sense, of course, it makes sense. I think, as I said, it runs that risk of just going into next year and going for free and just losing any kind of residual value that Harry is worth. We know he's worth way more than that anyway, but this circumstance it's come to. It's almost like when they had that big hoo-ha about the contract a year or so ago. That was kind of like the development plan that, well, okay, we're just going to have to tick this over until it gets near the end, and then we're in a strong position. It's a great point Sean made about his interviews and stuff. Whether that's Tottenham PR saying we don't want you talking to the press because you know what the questions are going to be when they come up, could be a reason. But outside of that, he did. Again, there's the notion that he came slightly late back to the pre-season and stuff because of the internationals, etc. Whether that plays part of it or not, but there is a sense of like there is pretty much every year of uncertainty around this, and I think as Spurs fans, we're tired of it. I'm sure he's tired of it. The club are tired, and the manager's tired of getting asked every 5 seconds. There just needs to be a conclusion: new contract or bugger off, basically. And I don't want him to go at all, but ultimately, I do believe that it does affect the team. It has to a certain extent. You can see that in the interviews. Like you got Son with Ange, like in the press conference the other day, and like, every question is about Harry, and someone's probably just sitting there going like, guys, like I'm actually sat here. Do you want to ask me any questions, sort of thing? And I think it probably just plays. I know they're all like professional and stuff, and they got his back no matter what. But it's got to play some part in that. And I think great points as well about funding everything. I know Sean knows more about the finances than I do, but we know Tottenham are tight with money. And whatever reasons they got in the background.
You don't need to be a financial expert to tell you that.
Yeah, of course. I think it's just one of those things where Tottenham, for whatever reason, don't have the money like other clubs do to just go, yeah, we're just going to buy these players. We have to actually do something about balancing the books.
It's a weird one, mate, because I don't, when you look at like Aston Villa that have got, I don't know, 30% of the revenue streams that Tottenham have, and they can go and they can just meet asking prices.
Yeah.
Newcastle have done it. Chelsea, I mean, they must have the most insanely intelligent accountants to be able to move money around and still find room for the next big guy. And then obviously they're looking at Caicedo tonight. But they only got the same amount of revenue as Tottenham have, or give or take 5-10%. So, they shouldn't really be able, on paper at least, to be able to spend the money that they are, but they're doing it through clever amortization processes. Yeah. They've looked at the new FFP rules and they've said, okay, there's opportunities here to push out on the forward, like it's called the front end of the curve. You push things out on the front end of the curve, delay the processes there, and then if you can sell players that you don't need and get higher end, quicker returns, or quicker ends of that money in earlier, it balances the money out over periods of time. And Daniel Levy looks like, I'm sure he's not unintelligent with his accounting policies, but it just doesn't look like he has that creativity or the risk profile. And at this stage, when you see other clubs that were 4 or 5 years ago that were in a championship that are now chomping at the bit and that are all over us and that are now, bigger threats than we thought, to me, it looks like he doesn't have, as I said at the start, I feel like it's come to the point now where the game has moved, the threats are larger and they're coming from different angles. And his way of thinking about things is no longer appropriate, I don't think, anymore. His risk profile isn't good enough. Neither is his reactionary rather than proactionary. It's everything about it right now is a frustration for me.
Yeah. And you look back on the time when he wanted to join Man City 2 years ago, and obviously for the 6 months after that, I mean, he was just terrible. His head wasn't in the game, and we couldn't really get a goal out of him or anything positive on the football pitch. And we've seen the 2 preseason games so far, 2 lackluster games from Harry Kane. Would you say there's similarities in this situation, or it's just preseason and we can't really tell?
I think it's still a bit of a blend. I think I just mentioned like a couple of the reasons why that could be outside of this transfer stuff, of course. But he's an ultimate professional at the end of the day. And we've seen like pictures and videos of him in training and stuff, and he's smiling, he's talking, etc., as you would expect. Those performances, I do think, can come slow when players do come back slightly later than others. That's not a full excuse, but it certainly plays its part. I do sometimes think like there's kind of like people not necessarily skew. I think is this maybe a strong word, but I think they look too much into things sometimes. I think obviously what counts is in a couple of weeks' time when that Premier League first game comes about. But then by then you'd hope that there's some form of situation result with regards to Harry. If it drags on into the season, then at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of people that despise our ownership and stuff anyway. The fact that it goes back to that point about strategy and everything, like if this is a situation, deal with it like as early as possible, or even just like, why on earth take this guy to Singapore and wherever else, or in Australia, if he's going to go. It's kind of just like, it's just a bit weird. So for me, it's like I'm not looking too much into that at all. I just, like Sean says, I think I absolutely don't want him to go. He's the best player I've ever seen in a Tottenham shirt in my lifetime, like that I can actually talk about and know every single one of his games. But at the end of the day, the club's comes first, and of course the team comes first, and I don't want these distractions anymore. It's getting extremely tedious. Like just every day, every article, every media outlet is talking about Harry, and it's just so boring.
And it's not going to stop till he goes. That's the honest truth. He's not, even if he
Or
signs a
until the
contract,
window
the rules
finishes.
will still play.
It's just every summer. Like every summer, it's so boring. Like the media must not have anything else to talk about.
Literally. But Sean, do you see similarities to that summer, or do you think it's way too early to tell right now?
So what summer was that? Sorry,
when he nearly left for Man City and then he down tools.
2 years ago.
When he was terrible for the first 6 months of that season, then Conte came in and then kind of reinvigorated him. But I'm saying because the first 2 games of preseason, he's looked very
hasn't been like that. Yeah, I'm not gonna. I wouldn't say that. That I'm not going to put Nuno. If there is any element of that, I'm not going to say it's Nuno, like Ange and Nuno are in the same bucket. I don't think Harry Kane is looking at Ange with a level of lack of interest. I just think as I said earlier, I think it's only 2 games, two sets of 45 minutes, so really 1 game. But in both games, I think he didn't look like. I thought he looked like he was getting in the way of moves. I don't think he knew whether to go to the byline or to pull back. His natural instinct sometimes is to pull back to the edge of the area, but the asking price, or sorry, the asking model of the 9 in that role is to get to the byline so that the guy on the wing has the option of pulling it in or pulling it back, and you're going to have space because the defenders are going to follow the guy to the byline. And Harry Kane probably doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to be the sacrificial lamb, so his natural instinct is to come back. But then you've got James Maddison there, who... Listen, if James Maddison can get his shooting boots on for what it's worth, I think he could have 10, 12 goals this season because of the way that shape, he seems to suit it. So, listen, I don't want to get off topic. I don't think that Harry Kane is downing tools. Do I worry that whether or not he will fit the model or we're going to get the best out of him? No, I am worried about that. And this argument that I've been making it for a long time, that there is a kind of Goldilocks zone around the valuation, that if Bayern Munich were only to come in for £60 million, I know they've already bid above that, but that argument that you should turn that down anyway because Harry Kane's goals would probably be able to get you into the 5th spot, which could get you the Champions League qualification if your coefficient points are enough, and that would then give you enough, generally speaking, money to make it worth the dice roll. This version of Harry Kane in this system, I'm not sure he's going to get, even if he was to stay and was to put his full effort into it. I don't necessarily think he'll get anything like 30 goals next season if he's asked to play in the 9 and Tottenham try to recreate and emulate the exact system that they played at Celtic. So, like I say, for me, my mind is made up. If 85, 90 million pound, 95 million pound, if that's the number that finally gets put across, I think we take it, move on. Let's get the next era on its way.
I'm with you, Sean. And there's been another update here from a reporter from Sport 1 and DAZN. He goes by the name of Konstantin Ekner. I've never heard of him, to be honest, but he says Bayern Munich are now understood to be willing to offer Tottenham a roughly £85 million for Harry Kane as a base rate fee. So it could be plus add-ons that as well. So we'll see how this one rumbles on tomorrow. But let's move on and talk about Pierre-Emile Hojbjerg. David Medina of Marca says that Tottenham want 42 million euros for the sale of Pierre-Emile Hojbjerg. We've heard that we might not be getting that fee for Atletico Madrid. Do you think that, we'll start with you, Si, do you think we may be pricing some teams out of a move for Pierre-Emile Hojbjerg, or do you think that is the going rate that he should be going for?
Possibly. I mean, I'm quite an admirer of him to an extent. I think he's a really good leader, certainly outspoken from what I hear in like the dressing room and everything. I know he's not sometimes always the tidiest of players, but at the end of the day, like part of team balance, you have to have all these different like attributes on and off the field. Is that price too high? I mean, I think a lot of things, or a lot of players in general, are inflated quite a bit in general for the whole like transfer markets. There's a lot of players I've seen in and out of clubs this year, and I'm like, where on earth are these numbers coming from? So I think that's definitely a big part of it. But I guess he's one of the kind of like senior players of the team, if you like. So it kind of maybe adds to that a bit more. I think he's got good leadership. I don't really think that plays too much into value of players to an extent, but I don't know. I think it's just maybe a bit of a ball game. for a better word, to just try and see what they can get out of him, and expect clubs that would come in and probably offer less anyway. So, obviously they say in this whole sales tactic, you start high and chip away at it, don't you? So I'm not surprised, but I don't, whether a player's worth it or not, everyone's got different opinions on that, of course. I think it's slightly high, to be honest, but I think they're just playing the ball games. Obviously, it's Daniel Levy, isn't it? So he's going to try and get as much as possibly can, and who wouldn't? But I would expect that if he did go, it'd probably be less, and it would be like the whole usual story of add-ons and appearances, etc. I mean, that's how I probably see it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, if they are trying to move on a Hojbjerg and the team are interested are Atletico Madrid, I mean, 42 million euros, what's that? About 36, 37 million pounds or something like that, in that ballpark figure. I mean, I do think it could be a bit excessive for someone like Atletico to pay. I mean, I know they're going through a bit of financial difficulties. Maybe they're going to need to sell before they do buy. And I personally believe if they're sticking to that point, I think he probably will be here next season. But how do you feel on it, Sean? Do you think it's a bit too high for someone like Atletico to pay?
It's a really interesting one. That the midfield market this summer is bonkers to me. You've got players like Moises Caicedo that Brighton are just holding firm. I know there's levels to the qualities here, but just as precedents being set, you've got Caicedo that's not going to go for less than 100. Declan Rice over 100 million. But then on the other end of the scale, you've got Sofiane Amrabat, who Manchester United are looking like they're going to be able to secure for about £20 million. And then you've got players like Manuel Locatelli out of Juventus that allegedly are available for £22 million. So there's a massive kind of broad spectrum of pricing that doesn't really make a lot of sense. We're seeing Southampton paying or rejecting bids for Lavia between 40 and 45 million. Obviously, everyone's got their own value proposition, whether it's experience, age, ceiling, English tax, whatever else. But I would say that if Atletico Madrid were to sell João Felix, and I think that's probably the most likely outcome if they can raise maybe 70, 80 million for him to rebalance their finances, then I think that 35 million pound, maybe, if they're asking for 42, if Tottenham are asking for 42 or something, I think that the right price is somewhere between 33 and 38 million euros. So maybe about 32, 33 million pound would be good business for us. We'd have trebled our money on him. He's been a great servant for the club. And listen, I think one of the selling propositions about him is that he doesn't get injured. He's built like a robot, right? And if you're looking for someone who is an ever-present in your team and you can rely on him to be there, then Pierre-Emile Hojbjerg has proven over the test of time that guy, he's made of rubber, right? He just doesn't feel the impact of tackles like other players do. So I'd be very happy to let him go. I'd wish him well. He's been a great servant. And then I would take that money. And if one of the players that are out there that are at the cheaper end of the spectrum are still available, and there's lots of DMs out there right now that I'd look at, Ibrahim Sangare from PSV Eindhoven, I think is a perfect fit for Tottenham. I like the fella from Sociedad, Zubimendi.
They're saying Locatelli's going for 25 million.
Yeah, Locatelli as well. I think he'll be a brilliant fit, a brilliant player. There's like I say, maybe a dozen midfielders. I don't think that the argument around the number 9 market, the strikers out there right now, every top team or the majority of top teams either need a 9 immediately or need one in 1 year's time. And there's so few number 9s out there. So whoever gets Harry Kane is going to start a bit of a merry-go-round of the other teams scrambling for what's left. Players like Vlahovic, players like whoever, right? We can go through it for days, but with the midfielding space, there is a lot of players out there that are very talented, and there seems to be a weird market where some of them at the higher end are being priced at ridiculous levels, but others seem to be being slept on, and you can pick up some really good bargains. So if Hojbjerg does go for £35 million, great. Wish him well. I don't think he fits our system anymore, and we can go and replace him and make ourselves more secure. And I do think doing that is going to be maybe not as essential as fixing the centre backs, but I do think, Ben, it's going to be a really important position for us to improve on if we can.
Yeah. And let's move on to the last story of the update, and it's regarding our star of preseason so far, which is Giovanni Lo Celso. As Javi Miguel, a Barcelona journalist, is saying that Lo Celso and Cancelo remain Barcelona's priorities this summer. We did hear over the past couple of days that apparently Ange Postecoglou has convinced Giovanni Lo Celso to stay at Tottenham. On the back of those pre-season games, side, do you think that he's one that should definitely be in our plans now, or you can't really read into pre-season too much?
Oh, it's a bit of both for me, to be honest. I mean, I've seen this before with loads of players, and then when it comes to the Premier League, actual
Darren Bent once scored 15 goals in pre-season.
Yeah. It disappears off the face of the earth, or there's just no consistency. But what I liked, particularly at the moment with Lo Celso and a couple of the other players, that they've come in with a kind of fresh mind. It's not like, oh, I've just come back from loan, I'm probably going to go out for another one. It's like they're actually fighting. And perhaps that's come from Ange a bit, that fighting mentality, or to be like, come on, let's make something of this. And there's an argument to say that he could be doing that to put himself in the shop window a bit as well. Who knows? But for me, I like a bit of that fighting spirit that these players that we deemed kind of like deadwood for many years, and that could have partially been unfair in the sense that maybe the managers that we had in just didn't recognise or didn't treat the players in the certain way that they needed to be. Who knows?
The systems that we were playing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And systems, everything that everyone wants to talk about. But for me, Lo Celso, you can tell there's talent there. There has been, every time we've kind of seen snippets of him, but there was never the consistency. And that's not just him. There's other players, as we just said. But I'm really kind of pleased to see the effort that he's put in to say, actually, I'm here. I'm wearing this Tottenham shirt, and I'm here to kind of like prove a point, or at least try my best to get into the Premier League season this year, and do the best that he can. So, hopefully it continues. As I said, I think he's a fantastic player. And, I think from the attacking perspective, he could be very important as well. So hopefully, that does continue into the first few games of the season. Whether he starts or not is another question, because that kind of like front line in the midfield at the moment is pretty packed, and especially if Bentancur comes back in the coming month or two as well, be really interesting to see what the starting 11 will be and whether he'll be in it or not. But if he keeps doing what he's doing, then he's definitely going to be knocking on that door for sure. And I like his link-up play. I really do like him playing with those other players around him at the top. Like he was, the night or 2 nights before, whenever the game was. For me, I want all of these players that came back. As much as I think most of them were deadwood, I always believe in that clean slate. Right, you come back from your loan. Let's see if you're actually capable of the supposed talent that you came in for. And as I said, preseason can be a bit skewed in terms of what we perceive the players to be doing or what they're capable of doing. It's really just down to a few weeks' time. That's where it really counts, and that's when they start going missing. So I can't judge really until a couple of weeks into the season. But as long as we find out quickly, so we can move them on before the window closes, because otherwise we're stuck with them for another 6 months again.
Sean, do you feel the same? I mean, he has performed really well in the minutes that he has had in pre-season so far. Has that been enough to convince you that he should be here to stay right now?
Do you know, it's weird. So I'd like to hear him do an interview. I'd like to get a bit of a personal vibe from him, just to see where his mind's at. He does appear to be a little bit happier as a person. I don't know, maybe he's relaxed a little bit, but I do worry about his general happiness attitude from prior periods at the club. Look, you can't knock the performances he's put in, but again, let's be real. It's 90 minutes, 2 45-minute sessions. One of them was against the pub team. He's brilliant. And and I made this argument yesterday, I think it was on a channel. I said, like, if you're going to look at based purely on the 2 45 minutes that the two players have played, you'd make the argument to say that Lo Celso has outperformed Maddison, in my opinion, right?
Yeah,
on those two shifts. Does that mean that you put Maddison in behind Lo Celso? Of course not. Not necessarily. Can Maddison play with Lo Celso? I don't think so. I don't think either of them have got enough defensive work. So then you've got the third variable, which is Ndombele. I don't think there's room in the squad really for all three of them. I think you have to make a choice between one of the like Lo Celso or Ndombele. I know that if you've got 3 midfielder positions, you're probably going to have 6, maybe a 7th if you take one of the 24th or the 25th names in the squad. And then when you put Sarr, you can add. You don't need to include Sarr because he's young enough. I think the same can be said for people like Alfie Devine. So if you're selling Hojbjerg and you're replacing him, then arguably there's space, but for me, it's about a conversation with Lo Celso to see where his head's at. If his head is in the game, I don't think there's a player in our squad that has a better weight of pass than Lo Celso. Yeah. That little touch that he has, those little flicks, they're very rarely anything other than absolutely perfect with the weight of pass. But the rest of his game leaves a little bit a lot to be desired at times. Defensively, I don't think he's necessarily there. And his attitude is the big question. But that needs to be a question that Ange needs to have. I haven't got any insight on that. But if he continues to perform against Shakhtar and Barcelona, then I'm happy for him to hang around if he wants to be here. But if he doesn't, then absolutely not. How do we find a buyer for him, though? We've got so many other people to be moving in and around, out, trying to bring people, and he's not at the very top. His name is not at the top of the priority list with regards moving one way or the other. So I worry about whether or not he'll be here under duress because we haven't had time to get the rest of the stuff done. And that, again, comes down to Daniel Levy and our board being distracted with 1,000 things and not enough personnel who are in place to do the jobs that we need to do. No director of football, no Scott Munn officially, etc. So, again, we're just running out of time to get everything done. But, yeah, Lo Celso, for me, I've liked what I've seen, but it remains to be seen whether or not he can continue doing it in the Tottenham shirt.
I think on what you're saying about, he might be down the pecking order about outgoings, which is true. But I think that he's probably one of the easier deals to do if he does want to go, because you're looking at the likes of Barcelona interested in, Villarreal interested in him, Betis interested. I mean, there's no shortage
as a loan,
of for him.
Is there money? Is there actually money associated?
I mean, that remains to be seen. That remains to be seen. But I think even if you're getting someone out the door with a loan, with an option to buy, with an obligation to buy, I mean, it's better than for them staying and festering around, isn't it? So I think it's still an option. And I think he's probably one of the easier ones to get out of the team. But from what I've seen from him, and I'm liking the attitude and application he's showing right now. Yes, it is only 2 halves in pre-season games. So I agree with you, Sean, that he needs to show it on a consistent basis going forward. And I guess he still does have the first month of the season while we're still in the transfer window as well. So I guess if
he wants to be here, Ben, I'm happy for him to stay. Yeah, I don't think we'll have a player quite like him. If he wants to apply himself and be happy at Tottenham, I'm all for it. But it's over to him, really.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right, so that brings an end to our Tottenham update today. Si, thank you so much for coming on. Tell the people where they can find you.
Usually in my lounge or somewhere else, usually bars with pina colada in one hand. But if you want to see me on some wonderful Web3 crypto chat, you can come on Wales of Wall Street. Appreciate the prompt there, Ben.
No problem. And Sean, as you can see, that's his YouTube channel, Spurs Talk Show. Go and hit that subscribe button. Any interesting content coming up on the Spurs Talk Show this week or next week?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously whatever's going on with Tottenham stuff, but I'm building out like a fairly depth video. It's almost ready to record regarding like the pros and cons of multi-club ownership. Every day there seems to be another tale, another like variable or factor that I need to throw in. Like I'm almost done, and then I go, oh, this has now happened. I've got to include that. And like the multi-club ownership thing, I think is a story that's going to continue to grow, continue to influence what's happening with football. All the big money boys, all the big ownership are looking to invest and divest their risk elsewhere. And I just, given the fact that Tottenham have a history with it, ENIC were one of the very first companies that ever did that stuff back in the 90s. I thought it would be quite cool to do an in-depth research or an in-depth piece on that. So that's going to come out hopefully next week.
All right, awesome. So go and take a look out on that for that. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We'll see you all very soon. Like, subscribe, and comment. And as always, come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.